Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Startup Boston podcast, where I interview entrepreneurs, investors, and influencers in the Boston startup community to uncover actionable advice and stories from their experiences. Today, I sit down with Braden Golub, founder and CEO of Spot, essentially the Airbnb of private parking spots. If you've ever been driving around the city not able to find a parking spot, wondering why you can't just park in someone's driveway or parking spot since they're not using it, then this app is for you. Spot allows people who have a parking spot they're not using to list it for when it's available, such as between 9 to 5 or 24 hours a day. People seeking a parking spot can then use the app to see what spots are available near their destination and time frame they wish. Braden started Spot after continuously seeing parking spaces around his Back Bay apartment going unused. With his background in real estate, Braden saw the potential of these unused parking spaces. In this episode, Braden shares the difficulties with setting up a two-sided marketplace, managing the expectations of providers within that marketplace, the importance of the first impression your app gives a user, and his advice to someone who wants to start an app-based business. Before I get you to today's episode, I want to first apologize for the slight bit of echo that is present in today's recording. I didn't realize at the time the room we were recording in was providing an echo, and I apologize for that. It's not severe, but it can be noticeable at times. Lastly, don't forget to enter this week's book giveaway for The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz by subscribing and writing a review on iTunes. If you've already done those two things, then you're already entered. Otherwise, make sure to do so for your chance to win. Enjoy today's episode. Thank you, Braden, so much for coming on the show today. Really excited to have you. Before we start talking about Spot and apps in general, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So I'm from Midwest. I'm from Cincinnati and went to Indiana University. So I studied business there. And then from there, I went out to Manhattan, did real estate in New York City, and then tried out Chicago as well before coming to Boston in 2009. Since then, I've gotten involved in the real estate and technology sector here in Boston and started Spot about 2 years ago.
What brought you to Boston?
So my cousin had a charity that was youth driven and he needed a little assistance with that. So I came out to help with that. And then I started getting involved in the real estate as well. That was late 2009. So I've been here almost 7 years now.
Okay. So how did you go from real estate and charity to starting an app based on parking spots?
So I've always known that I wanted to start something. It was just difficult to hone in on what that was going to be. And, from the tech side of things, I'm not technical. I can't code. So I knew that I was going to need a very basic idea that I could explain to someone that they could go and code for me. And it just so happened that I was living in Back Bay at the time, and I kept on coming back from work or even leaving in the morning, and I kept on seeing all these empty parking spaces behind my building. And these weren't empty parking spaces that people were getting for free. This was something that people were paying $300-$400 a month for. So I realized how large of a value that was, and I kind of related that to real estate and my experience in real estate and said, hey, there's an opportunity here. And that's kind of when I just decided, hey, let's go full force into this, and started development very shortly thereafter.
So how did you go from the idea of this parking spot app to creating it, making it happen?
So I was working at a company called The Rental Beast at the time, very similar to an MLS of apartment rentals. Okay. So I saw the technology side of things and kind of how you were able to develop it and what kind of teams you needed. I'm not technical, so I have no freaking clue. But I had a few very good friends within that community that helped me find a team to get that idea off the ground. Meaning from idea, concept to wireframes, from wireframes to, an actual working app. Mm-hmm. At the time, I didn't think I would be building an MVP. But I realized about 6 months into it that it was very, very minimal product that was developed. And I just wanted to get something off the ground. So I put in some of my own money to develop the product and didn't raise any money before I started developing it. Mm-hmm. And it took about 6 months once I decided on the team from that until our beta launch, which was in June of 2014.
Were there any things when you first decided you wanted to do it that you thought would be, easy, and then you quickly learned that they wouldn't be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the uncertainty is probably most explicit when you're trying to think back on, what to do, when to do, and how to do it. But I knew nothing was going to be easy, right? I guess actually, I mean, this sounds stupid. Setting up the company legally, I thought it was going to be pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And I realized very shortly thereafter that I should have just hired a lawyer.
A lot of paperwork
to do it for me. That took a long time, but the development aspect of it, I had no idea, and my expectations were for it to be shorter. Took double the time. So I would say development and then the legal aspect of it was probably a little harder than I thought it was going to be.
Okay. So tell us what Spot is.
Sure. So Spot is simply a mobile application that's a marketplace for parking spots. Think of it similarly to Airbnb, but for individuals and businesses. So you or me have a spot that maybe we're not using throughout the day. Or maybe we don't have a car, but we have a parking spot with our place. We can rent that out on the Spot app, earn anywhere from $10 to $30 a day, depending on where you live. And then we also work with businesses. So think the Whole Foods or CVS's of the world, or small mom and pop pizza shops or salons. We monetize empty parking spots really well. So most people don't realize that they have a revenue source sitting in their backyard. We allow them to monetize that with very little effort. So on the consumer side, you're able to find parking spots for much cheaper than garages, right? So because we're bringing more inventory onto the market, thus increasing supply, we feel that prices should eventually be lower. On our app, they always are. So we're always 50 to 60% cheaper than all garages around that area or any other option.
Yeah. So if I'm a user, I want to find a parking spot in the city, how do I do it?
Very simply, go to parkeasier.com. You can download it from there or the App Store. You open up the app. It is 3 taps. You enter your credit card or Apple Pay, put your car information in there, and it's as easy as, again, tapping like an Uber. Yeah. And we'll give you directions directly to that parking spot within 3 to 5 meters. And then we'll give you 2 pictures to find the parking spot once you arrive. You can also communicate back and forth with the owner if you need to, or with our support team.
Okay. And what if I have, an extra parking spot that I'm not using, or I'm gone during the day and I want to put it on the Spot app? How do I do that?
Sure. So you can reach out to us through web, or you can simply download the app, and that's all within the mobile application as well. So you can take 2 pictures of your spot, decide on the rates you want to charge. We help you with suggested pricing. And then you just need to put in a few details like park to the left of the blue dumpster or park to the right of the yellow Lamborghini. And that way people can find the spot, and if there's any disclaimers, as well as scheduling. So it's really easy to upload a parking spot. It takes about 90 seconds, but we can also help you with it as well.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about your market, right? Because you have a 2-sided market, right?
Yeah, sure.
You have the people that provide the parking spots, then you have people that then use the parking spots through the app. So how do you start a business, an app-based business, with 2 markets? Which one do you go after first? Do you do them both at the same time, or how does that work? Or what did you do?
Yeah, so marketplaces are notorious for being extremely difficult to start. But once you get a stronghold on a market, then you're in really good shape, because it just kind of turns into a recurring revenue stream. Marketplace in this specific category, parking, I could have 1 million people looking for parking, but if I don't have spaces, then there's no value there. Yeah. So our first focus is inventory. So we need parking. And the only way we do that is through our secret sauce of going out and finding parking spots and making sure they're on our platform. And then with that, then we start to open up the consumer side.
Okay.
So once we have coverage in a certain area, then we can market to that certain area for the demand side.
Yeah.
Say, hey, there's parking around your area for this much cheaper. You can go park here. We have a referral program as well that allows people to come into the app and park for free at first as well.
Okay. So how do you bring on, I don't know if you want to go into details or if you can, how do you bring on, before you launch in a certain market, how do you bring on the providers of the parking spaces without them knowing if anyone is actually going to end up using it?
Yeah, sure. So managing expectations is really important here. So telling that owner or vendor what to expect before they come on the platform is really important. So let's say we're going to, Raleigh, North Carolina next as our next city. We have a sales team that goes out, procures the parking spots, talks to these individuals actually face to face. And then we also have digital marketing that allows us to get to the individual one-off owners. Once we have them on the platform and say, hey, we'll monetize your spot, we're really upfront. Hey, we're not going to turn on this city for another month or so, but we want to make sure you're on the platform. And once we do turn it on, you'll start to see revenue then. And if you don't manage expectations, that side of the market is going to collapse before you even start it. So that's something we actually learned really early on is utilization is key, and making sure the owners are happy is also paramount.
How many, do you have like an estimate of how many parking spots in Boston go unused?
Yeah, so there's roughly 30 to 40,000 private parking spots in and around Boston. So like Somerville, Brookline, Boston area. Anything we deem high demand, people would park in, roughly 30 to 40,000 of those.
Okay.
That's not counting business though. So those are just like individually owned, one-off individual parking spots. When you bring in business, it almost doubles that. When you look at a city like Chicago, there's like 150 to 200,000. So there's a great deal of opportunity. It's just a matter of uncovering that inventory that's sitting empty every day.
Yeah. So what do you think is preventing people from using apps like yours to sell out the space in those spots?
Well, I think, a lot of it is education.
Just awareness?
Awareness. Some people also don't realize how easy it is, right? Mm-hmm. Because again, this is a newer concept. I think at first people had a very, very hard time understanding Airbnb, or, even Zipcar, right? Zipcar was a very early, sharing economy company. Yeah. And, people didn't really understand that idea. Once you promote what you're doing and provide that awareness and say, hey, it's this easy and there's very little liability, then it's hard to say no. So it really is awareness. There are some individuals who say, hey, I don't want to, for the $30 a day or so, I just don't want to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And that's not that's not our type of customer.
Right. Our
type of customer is a cost conscious person who knows that they can earn money off an asset that they have. And people are doing it with cars these days. People are doing it with their apartments. People are going to be doing it with parking spaces too. So it really is awareness.
What have been some of the largest changes you've made to the app since you launched the app?
To the actual app, like technically, or like the business?
Both. Yeah, both.
So the app, we actually are on our third iteration. We learned very early on that people had difficulty finding private parking spots. So we needed to change from an address-based system to a latitude-longitude-based system. So you could go behind buildings or find an exact parking spot within like a large lot. So that was like some early technical development that we needed to do, along with like messaging between you and I, or me and Spot, or you and Spot was also difficult. So we needed to make sure that was very, very simple. On the business side, we only went after individual spot owners early on, and it was very, very difficult. So we found out really early on that the procurement side, the inventory side, was too expensive or too hard to get individual one-off spots. So that's when we opened it up to like churches and schools and the partnerships I was talking about with businesses. And that was the biggest turning point for us thus far, is like understanding that there are more than just private parking spots for individuals that can be monetized.
Do you find that overall these businesses are pretty willing to open up their
businesses
spots?
Are actually more willing because their basis for everything they do is revenue.
Yeah.
Right? If we're not interrupting their core business, then there's no reason not to use us. So the way that we start with some of these guys, we just say, hey, whenever you're closed, that's when we'll use your parking spots. Mm-hmm. And that way we'll never get in the way of your customers.
Yeah.
And then we open it up a little further as we create that partnership. We also work with a lot of large landlords. So most of these guys actually have a better understanding than individuals of monetizing an asset or just creating a revenue stream they didn't have before.
Because they know that, when they're open and those spots are being used, they're getting revenue from people buying from them.
Exactly.
But then when they're closed, those spots aren't being used, so they're not. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So what sets Spot apart from other parking apps that are available?
Sure. So there's a good amount of parking apps actually some great parking apps that find you garage spaces really quickly. So for instance, there's a garage behind our building here that charges $22 a day. And there's 3 or 4 different apps like Spot Hero or ParkWiz or Parking Panda that can find you that spot through a very simple interface. They have a really nice app. They've raised a good amount of money. That finds you kind of like professionally managed garages. And then you have another side of the parking landscape, which is meters. Meters are really hard to find. In Boston alone, there's roughly 8,000 of them, but 200,000 cars come into the city every day. So there's just not enough.
Yeah.
But once you can find a meter, they have a really cool app called Park Boston that allows you to like increase your time or, pay through the app rather than use quarters. Ours is a really nice marriage because we're bringing new inventory onto the public market, which is always going to be cheaper and has better availability and better proximity. So we can get people closer to where they're going at a better value because it's cheaper with more convenience too, because it's very, very dynamic with how you can book a spot by a half hour, day, week, or month. So it really is kind of up to the consumer how they use it. But for us, we're uncovering this inventory that's never really been utilized before. And that's really where our value comes into play.
What's been one of the largest drivers for your growth?
Honestly, the viral aspect of it has been surprisingly impressive. We implemented a referral program that's similar to Uber. I share it with you. You get $15 to park for the first time. Yeah. And I get $15 as well for my next time. And that's been pretty impressive organic growth. Press has been very helpful as well.
Yeah.
So, understanding where people are looking for parking is also difficult to do. So we had to get a lot of analytics on where people were like literally driving to market to those people. So we have a lot of digital, lot of digital marketing that helped on that side too. Spots though is number one, right? So our inventory is really our driver. If we have, 20,000 parking spots on the platform, I know that this is a very, very sustainable business. At this point, we don't have 20,000. So that's kind of like our goal is to get to a point where enough spots will create enough opportunity for that demand to actually use it on a consistent basis.
And you find that those referrals are those people continue to use the app and continue to purchase?
So one of our most impressive stat is retention. Once someone uses us for the first time, 60% of the time they're coming back. But once they come back that second time, they're using us 12 to 14 times thereafter. So it kind of becomes part of their routine. They get up in the morning, they book their spot, they're on their way.
Yeah.
Similarly, a lot of real estate brokers use this, or people who are on the go, delivery based systems, and that's been really interesting to see as well. I mean, from our perspective, again, going back to the spots, if we have more spots, we can do a lot more. But we've been impressed by that side as well.
As you've been growing Spot, is there anything that at the time seemed small or inconsequential, but has come to play a major role?
Yes, 1,000 things, but some interesting things like the intricacies of each transaction. So like logistics and you finding your actual spot, took a lot of time, and understanding that this is just like, a piece of a concrete that's really never been quote unquote tracked before. We had to digitize that. So it's one thing to get someone to the spot, but to make sure that parking in the right spot is another thing. So signage was really important for us.
Yeah.
We didn't have any signage at first. We're just relying on the technology. So we took something super archaic and implemented that within the technology, so people understand that once they get to that spot, there's going to be some type of marker there that shows them exactly where to park.
Okay.
And that was probably one of the bigger but simple changes that we made.
Is it like a spot sign or something?
There's
like
a few different, we have signs, actual signs that say, reserved for spot. And then we also have concrete decals that are just like, on the actual spot. And then we have A-frame signs as well.
Okay. So how many markets are you in right now?
So we're just in Boston. Okay. But we have spots in Chicago, New Jersey. We have spots all over the place. We've done transactions in other cities and other states, Chicago and New Jersey and Philly, but that's just kind of like network effect, right? We're focusing on Boston to ensure that we can open up another city within the next 6 months or so. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned before, marketplaces are really freaking hard to build. So they take a little longer than some of these other companies that you just throw a lot of money into and you're able to build up the consumer side.
Yeah.
For us, we need to concentrate on unearthing this inventory, which is harder to do. So it's a little more deliberate, and that's why we're trying so hard to get to another city.
Do you find that a lot of the providers of the parking spots, do they stick with the app long, or
super low churn rate? So if you put a parking spot on the platform, there's really no reason for you to take it off unless you're moving, or maybe you didn't have a car before and you got a car, right? Okay. Other than that, we provide a very dynamic platform in order for you to make money. Yeah. So 2% churn over the life of the company on parking spots. Wow. And that just goes to show you that people are open to the idea. They just need to make that initial push, get on the app and see the value there.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little about just apps in general. So what do you think, turns users off of an app the most? Is it the design of the app, the functionality of the app?
Yes. Both. Apps really do need to be pretty. I mean, I think that's probably number one. I mean, functionality comes after it's pleasing to the eye, right? Mm-hmm. So there's some amazing apps out there that at first probably started with a really, really deep functionality standpoint, and then they needed to create a nice UI. For me, and I'm sure for you too, like it really matters kind of like what that first screen is to you. Yeah. And that first initial impact of what is this? And if people need to like fill out forms and like, give your firstborn to sign up for an app, they're not going to do it.
Yeah. Just close it.
You're right. Delete it.
Yeah.
So, ours has taken a lot we've changed it a lot on just like the flow. You should be able to open up the app, look at parking spots like that. Right. And that's now what you're able to do. In other apps, same thing, like Uber. Even before you sign up, you see cabs and UberXs around, right? And that provides that, kind of like that salesy opportunity is to say, all right, now you see what we got, now you should sign up. And that's how we do it as well. But I would go back to UI saying that's probably, it does need to be simplistic from the functional standpoint, but it really, really needs to look nice and feel nice to the user.
Mm-hmm. So what advice would you give to someone that wants to start an app-based business?
Find a technical co-founder that is really, really good.
Yeah. Don't try to do it yourself if you can't.
Exactly. It's hard. It really is hard from, a real estate guy like myself to try to think in on a code basis, right? Like I'm just not programmed that way. So I'm very binary with my developer. Like, hey, can you just go do this? Right? I don't know the intricacies behind it. And if I had that, then a lot of things would have been easier. From that standpoint, I think to do market research to understand it really, really well before you pull the trigger is also really important. Mm-hmm.
So how did you do your market research?
So a lot of, I used the Googles a lot. But I looked at other companies who have tried it and didn't work. I've also looked at companies who did succeed with it. So there's one company in London they validated this same exact concept. They're doing really, really well. Okay. So I kind of saw what they're doing, saw there was really no one here, and saw that opportunity to just pull the trigger.
Mm. So what excites you most about Spot's future?
The idea is to build the world's largest parking garage without the real estate investment, right? And the fact that, you'll notice this now as you drive around, but there are a lot of empty parking spots. Yeah. And the opportunity there is so explicit that it's just a matter of ensuring they're on the platform, right? Like, how do we get that parking spot that's empty for even 3 hours at a time to make sure that's on spot? So someone can either be making money or finding cheaper parking. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that will help the cities move better too, right? If you know you're coming into the city and you have a parking spot to go straight to,
you don't have to drive around and find,
So, the city has really enjoyed that aspect of that as well. We've talked to a few municipalities who understand how large parking a concern is for its constituents. So, it's been proven, well, quote unquote proven that 30% of parking or 30% of traffic in cities is created by people looking for parking spaces. So if we can negate that, not only are we getting rid of the traffic congestion, but that's also a pollution pollution assistant as well. Like we'll at some point get to a very clean, efficient city if we can have people go directly to a parking spot.
Do you know how long people usually spend driving around trying to find a spot?
Yeah, it's average 18 to 20 minutes before they say, fine, I'll just park in a garage.
Yeah.
Right. For me, time opportunity is, that cost is really,
that's a lot.
It's expensive. So I'd rather just throw it in an expensive garage than circle the block. Some people are the opposite. Now I can use the app and know that it's very simple before I leave, or even ad hoc while I'm, when I get to Newberry Street and I find there's no parking, I can just open up the app.
Yeah.
Right.
So how is being a founder different from what you expected? Or is it everything that you expected?
Yeah, I would say the stress levels are probably a little more than I expected, but that's to be expected. Raising money is one of those things that you either got it or you don't, and it's tough. So that part is probably one piece that I didn't really expect, is getting the funds in order to build this into what I think it can be. And also, appreciating the fact that I have people who are depending on me. Right. And that kind of like adds a little bit of stress to it, is understanding that they are there because I'm ensuring that there's liquidity for them to be there, if that makes sense. Like they're going to get their next paycheck. Yeah. And from a founder's perspective, I'm kind of like big vision guy. And from what I've learned, I have to kind of like segment that out rather than just look at that end goal. So I expected it to be a little more streamlined. And I've learned that operationally, it takes a lot longer to start the infrastructure of a company and get going and get to another city and scale and all those fun things.
Do you think that raising money has made it easier for you, or is it just added to the stress?
Oh man. I'll leave it at it's added to the stress.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you think most first time entrepreneurs are afraid of that they shouldn't be?
Just making that first decision to do it. It took me a while just because I couldn't find something that I was really confident in that could be something big. But I had a conversation with my dad, and my dad just kind of said, hey, listen, this is something you've always wanted to do something. And if you look at this as you look at like getting an MBA or going back and doing your schooling, this is going to be your MBA. Yeah. If it fails and does miserably, then you learned a lot and you can apply that to the next thing you do. But pulling the trigger and doing it is the most, that's like the first step of just trying it. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to do, is because it's so uncomfortable to go, to go against the norm.
Just committing and doing it.
Yep.
Yeah. So what would you tell those people that are afraid to commit to do it?
Understand the market that you want to get into really quick, but also know that you'll be working for yourself. And that's the best motivation you can get.
What's the most important thing that you've learned, either about yourself or about business in general that, since starting Spot?
I honestly, like deep down, did not ever think that I could work this hard. So, the amount of hours that, I put into this, and the amount of kind of basic thought that goes into this is, it's consuming. So I honestly didn't think that I had this type of I knew I worked hard. Like I always work hard toward what I'm doing, but I never knew that I could work this hard. And I've kind of like, I've pushed myself, and that's kind of cool to see like how far you can go when something's really important to you. Yeah. And that's been a pretty cool thing to see at the same time without getting sleep. Right.
Yeah. So how many people are on the Spot team right now?
So we have 7 people. We have 1 intern who creates some content, 1 more intern coming in. We have a customer support database manager, a great ops guy, COO. And then we have 2 developers, and bringing on a marketing guy as well. Okay.
So what's most important to you when hiring?
Work ethic.
Work ethic.
Yeah. I mean, you have to know that you're going to be putting in a lot of hours, and that the hours are not going to be typical hours. So, the first thing I usually look for beyond, just straight up working hard is probably like a competitive spirit, and obviously they have to be there with an intelligence factor. Like I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but all we're doing every single day is problem solving. Like whether it's on a small scale or a large scale, people need to be able to think through things in a very different way, a different manner that's typical from like the larger corporations that have a very, very structured environment. This is, hey, let's throw some spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, and then go with that. And you need to have that problem solving attitude. So probably work ethic, competitiveness, and then also the intelligence factor, problem solving.
Yeah. Because skill is something that they can learn, right? Whereas if they come in, with that work ethic, that they'll be able to learn it. Exactly. Whereas if they come in maybe with the skill but not the work ethic, it's more difficult to build that up.
I would also probably add the culture fit is important too.
Yeah.
Right. We've learned that, not everyone is able to work in this type of environment. So I think understanding that is really important. So before we hire anyone, we usually like hang out with them a little bit, go get a drink and, have a meal just to kind of see like how they interact. And that's important because we're going to be, we're working with them 12, 14, 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot to understand who you're bringing onto the team before you actually do it.
Yeah. See if they'd be someone you'd want to hang out with outside of work as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Then, you won't mind being
working
with them all day.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think the top reason is someone should join a startup?
I would say potential. Understanding that there are problems to be solved out there is so empowering, right? And you look at, if someone came to you like 15 years ago and said, you're going to be able to rent out your apartment for a night on your mobile phone, you would look at them like they had 12 heads. And maybe even like 6, 7 years ago, right? Yeah. And that just goes to show like how quickly we're evolving with technology and how much of an impact a small little device can have on someone's everyday life. So I think the potential that you can use technology to acquire is really amazing. And if you are looking to kind of put in that work ethic, then the potential is really, the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah.
There is no limit.
Yeah. I'd also say the potential of what you can learn about yourself, like what you said earlier.
No doubt.
How hard you can work. You didn't realize.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of learning and kind of self understanding throughout this process as well. And for me, it was a little more blunt, right? Like it was explicit in my face. But for some people, it's learning small things about them, and some people it's learning big things. And for me, it's been both. It's awesome.
I want to turn now and go into our rapid fire questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Not necessarily rapid fire answers, so feel free to be long winded on them. Doesn't matter.
All right, cool.
What's another startup in Boston that you're most excited about?
Oh man, there are so many. I really like the idea of Leanbox, which is out of Cambridge, I believe. They're pretty much replacing vending machines with like healthy options. But it's nice for enterprises or companies. So even young startups provide that for their employees. Their employees get those healthy snacks for free.
Yeah. And
you're creating a nice environment for that work environment. On the technical side, man, there's so many. The elephant in the room is DraftKings. I think there's going to be some amazing things that happen in the next 6 months that show how easy it is to monetize a market if you come at it the right way from a legal perspective. And they really, they've done some crazy things in the last 3 years. So I love seeing growth, fast growth. And they're one of those guys that I know will be a huge, huge win down. They're already a win, but even a bigger win down the road.
Yeah. They've just taken off.
Yeah.
What's something about you that most people don't know?
I play golf at every single instance I'm able to. So if I wake up really early in the morning, I can get out there at like 5:30 or 6 o'clock. Then I'll go play a quick 9 and then I'll come into the office.
Wow. Where's your favorite place to play?
There's a place up in Peabody. It's called the Meadow at Peabody, and it's just easy to it's like 15 minutes from my house, easy to drive over, and usually we can get on right away.
Wow. Do you have any favorite blogs or books?
No. I'm not a book guy. I did read The Power of One, which was pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. And then I just finished reading this. What's it called? This don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
It's all small stuff or something, or whatever the title was. But I'm more of an interwebs reader. So
okay. So what do you like to read then?
And anything that comes out technology related, I'm usually all over. I'm all over TechCrunch. Boston is great for the local scene. And, I usually do my quick social catch up, like through Twitter feeds, and then, go to Boston and TechCrunch for like my early morning reads of the day.
Okay. How old are you now?
I'm 32.
32. Okay. So what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self? And what were you doing at that time?
Eat better. Eat healthier. And I would also probably say start something sooner. I was at Indiana University when I was 20, and I figured I just wanted to learn real estate really quickly. So I went to New York and did that, but I probably would have started something a little sooner, had I known where I was going to be 5, 6, 7 years later. With that said, still no regrets.
What do you think makes the Boston startup scene unique?
Oh, I think that starts with the consumers. We have, I think, one of the most unique consumer bases in the U.S. because we have 250,000 students that come into the city every single September 1st. They are early adopters of technology. They're understanding of early technology, and they also are very blunt about feedback. With that, you can create a tool that will get feedback so quickly that you can iterate quickly enough and also have the, backup and funding to get you to where you need to be. So, you look at the West Coast, there's a lot of funding going on. Boston's right up there with them. And that's amazing to see, right? The infrastructure is there for startups to get started here. And if you have this amazingly talented user base to help optimize the experience, then all you really do need is the money to go do it. And luckily we have the funding environment here in Boston that's amazing to go along with the consumer base as well.
Yeah.
And then the talent of MIT, Harvard on the technical side too.
It doesn't help. It doesn't hurt. That's what I meant to say.
It doesn't help that they're so expensive. It doesn't hurt either.
All right. Just a few last questions here to close out.
Sure.
So where can people find out more about Spot?
Parkeasier.com, at the Spot app on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Okay. And where can people connect with you online?
I'm at BSG617 on Twitter. Shoot me a note on email if you'd like to as well. b@parkeasier.com. B as in boy. And you can always somehow find me through the interwebs if you try hard enough.
Do you have any parting thoughts, advice, or suggestions for the audience?
Start now. Again, going back to like some of the things that I look back on, I do wish I had started sooner, but again, there are some limitations when it comes to technology. So, I probably couldn't have started this when I wanted to, right? Like if I look back 10 years and I wanted to start a mobile app that helps people find parking, it would be difficult to do because apps weren't really there 10 years ago.
Yeah.
9 years ago. So, I would just say start now and stay hungry and keep going.
All right. Thank you, Braden. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate the time.
If you enjoyed this episode, please go and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and write a review. By subscribing, you'll get all of my new episodes automatically fresh onto your podcast app. So make sure to do so. And it really helps me out in the rankings and with acquiring new listeners. Remember, all show notes can be found at startupbostonpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. And until next time, if you have any feedback, ideas for guests, or just want to say hi, you can reach me at nick@startupbostonpodcast.com. That's NIC@startupbostonpodcast.com. Cheers.